All right, welcome back. In this particular video, what we're going to do is we're going to finish up our assembly by adding the screws and standoffs to this design. So in our last videos, we completed up this assembly here, where we made this part, we 3D printed it. These are coming off of our Prusa printers here at Luddy Hall at IU. And so here's our acrylic laser cut piece. It comes off our Trotec laser cutter. And then we've got the other pieces. Again, these all three 3D printed parts came off of our Prusas Mark IIIs. And then here's our Raspberry Pi assembly, which we're going to get set up to get mounted into this enclosure. Now, if you remember, when we designed this case, we put these standoffs on the bottom here. Well, it turns out that when I designed this, I got a little bit too aggressive on the size of these holes, and they're just a little bit too small. So I want to talk a little bit about how we adjust that here in the short term. Then, of course, you could go back into your design and open those holes up. In the long term, if you haven't already printed it, I would encourage opening those up probably by a couple of tenths of a millimeter, just to make room for the threads. I sized them the same size as the holes in the Raspberry Pi, but they closed up a little bit when the printing happened. Having watched a number of these get printed, they're just a little bit tight. You have to really force the screw to get it through those holes. All right, so one thing I want to point out, now this is pretty much a local to Luddy thing. If you're making this and you're not at Luddy, well, this maybe doesn't apply to you, but at Luddy, I've left a drill out. So if you're needing to modify, drill through those holes, as you'll see in a minute, you can go ahead and do that there in Luddy Hall. This is our Fab Lab for those of you who haven't seen it. It's a beautiful facility, actually. And so here's a place where you can get screwdrivers here in the middle. And then over here, on the far right, you've got these screws, these bins of screws where you can pick up all of the hardware that is necessary to put this together. All right, so back to our document camera here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill out these holes here in the enclosure. So I'll just run a drill through. So again, I'm just making clearance holes. I'm going to do that same thing here just to make it a little easier in this base. So in a perfect world, we would have caught this before we made it, but well, the real world, sometimes you make mistakes. And so there you go. I'll clean those up just a little bit here. Dust that off. All right. So there's our case. We've enlarged our holes. This screw here, the longer of the screws that we've got. Let me actually just show you the hardware that we're going to use. So I'll put this aside. So we've got 4 long plastic screws here that are 3/8 inches long, and they're going to go into the. I'm sorry, not 3/8 inches. I can't remember exactly how long these are, but these screws are going to go into the base up through the bottom of the enclosure. I dropped one. Up through the bottom of the enclosure that are going to go up through like that, and they're going to come in through the Raspberry Pi in the bottom and into the standoff. We've got some smaller screws here that are going to connect to our standoffs, and those are going to go in between the Pi here. I've got some older standoffs. These are actually 3mm standoffs. This hardware here is all 440. And then I've got some plastic threading screws here that are for screwing the lid and the cover down to the enclosure itself. So they'll go through these holes up here in the corners. All right, so let's go ahead and start with well, first of all, let's talk about how you take this apart. So the Raspberry Pi and the Sense Hat are joined with probably yours. If you've got one that is standard prepared for E101, if you don't, well, this won't apply to you. But if you got them standard as I prepared them for E101, they'll have standoffs just in this upper corner up here, so you won't have to remove all 4. But I'm going to show you removing all 4. So you'll have to remove the screws on the bottom to lift this off. But you'll see that the board parts right here at that joint between these pins, this pin header, and this this black plastic connector here. Now, one thing you may find is it may be the case that when you pull it apart, depending on how tight this is, that this part here actually comes off. Actually, mine maybe too tight. There it goes. This one comes off. And so if it does come off, you can stick it back through the holes and back into the sense hat. That's fine. This thing here is a connector as well. It just has holes in the bottom of the board for this to go through. It doesn't hurt anything if this comes loose. Just push it back in. All right, so I'm going to remove this 3mm hardware and get rid of it here. We don't need it. It's not relevant to what we're doing. Let's take it all off. Hand tight is good enough for this stuff too. By the way, it's just plastic, so don't get crazy with the screwdriver when you're putting all this together. All right. So the first assembly step is really going to be to take those little screws that you pulled from the bins, and we're going to run them through here. We're going to hook a standoff on the other side, and we're just going to screw all this together. All right, just like that. So you've got this part here, and so I'm going to do that times 4 here, just so I've got a good connection. You know, you could probably get away with 2 of these. Even to hold it to the case, it's not, this thing's not going to be experiencing any vibration or anything, so it's not like it needs a ton. But we'll go ahead, and we got 4 holes, so we'll put 4 standoffs on. All right. So there you go. So you've got your final assembly here of your sense hat. Now I'm going to put it all back together. So I'll put it back together with the pie. Try to line these pins up. And it takes a little bit of force to snap them together, or slide them together, I guess is what you'll feel when you put them together. All right, so now I've got these holes, and through those holes I can see the standoffs. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this together, and I'll get my base here. My base goes on the bottom like that. And I have to kind of fish the screw through. Like this, and kind of get one started, and then I'll kind of line it up, and I'll get the other one in the other corner started. So I'll do the corners first. You kind of have to feel around to make sure you can start to feel it engage. Do this with your hands so you don't cross thread it. Just kind of feel it as it goes up in there, and when it starts to engage, you'll feel it. I dropped the other one on the floor here, which I'm gonna have to look around for. Well, I'll skip over that. I'll just skip over that part. I'll just go ahead and show you these 3 screws. You'll have to use your imagination that, oh yeah, I really did put the 4th one in. I'll have to go get one of those from the lab here in a minute. Now, when you're running these down, as soon as you feel resistance, go ahead and stop so you don't, these screws are not really made to be stretched a lot like you might with a metal screw to hold it in. It'll hold by itself, just in there. So now your pie is pretty solidly in that enclosure, right? Now, let's go ahead and put the lid on, so we'll line up the top. And this is a little bit simpler, ordeal here, just to go through these lids, the lid and the cover here, and then I'll just line it all up and run it in like that. And the first one you might want to leave a little bit loose just so everything pivots. You're not going to put any of these in real tight, but I'm going to get it started. And those pilot holes that we left in the top of the plastic, that's plenty to allow this screw to bite down into the base. So go, just like that. There you go. That's it. So this is all McMaster car hardware. You can design that right out of Fusion. I'll leave part numbers if you're interested in buying some of that hardware yourself. Again, if you're an E101 student, we've got that in the lab. But if not, you can go out and buy your own hardware and assemble it. Again, I would open these holes up a little bit. That's it. That's your case. The hardware's in place, and yeah, hopefully you enjoyed designing this case. Of course, it's a kind of a first order assembly here. You can imagine a lot of improvements you could do to this to make it better, but it's a good starting point if you want to do an enclosure for something. And so more on those sorts of enclosures in the future, hopefully with future videos. All right. Talk to you later.